Welcome to another edition of Moral Side of the News. We're glad you're with us this weekend. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me, as always, is a distinguished panel. Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson, St. Peter's United Church of Christ and MOLO Village CDC. Reverend Sally McClain, Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville. A series of mass shootings in the news this past week. We'll get to those shortly, but first, what do you think about proposed changes in Kentucky gun laws? Two bills up for discussion would allow Kentuckians to carry concealed weapons in more places like government buildings, colleges, and schools. Northern Kentucky Republican Representative Savannah Maddox wants to repeal or roll back gun-free zones. So let's turn to our panel and let's get your reaction to this topic. Panel?
It makes me sick to think in terms of more people having firearms, concealed or unconcealed. I mean, the amount of gun violence in this country is beyond imagination. And the thought of people having more access to do more harm, it just causes me a lot of pain and anxiety.
Well, as always, we've had this topic so many times, and it kind of drives me a little crazy sometimes too, because I mean, I respect rights and I respect responsible gun owners, but with every right comes responsibility. And it seems to me that we honor the right, but not always the responsibility of where do you put those guns, how do you keep them safely, and the safe use of those, and to make sure that guns don't get into the wrong hands. Mm-hmm. We don't seem to be doing as much about that. Now, those who are for gun rights say, well, that's limiting our rights. It's got to be a balance, and especially gun. When a school wants to be a gun-free zone, I think they have a right to say that. Or a government building, or public places. I've never been crazy about the concealed weapon laws. I understand law enforcement certainly needs that and should have that right, but unfortunately, today, too many kids have guns, and I think she was even advocating, although she says above 18 or reducing it to 18, which would be normally out of high school. But there are too many kids, middle school, high schoolers that take guns to school. And that just scares the bejeebies out of teachers. And I don't think they need to be having guns in their classrooms, because you don't know who's going to get into that drawer or how it's going to be locked and all that kind of stuff. It's just we've got to have some common sense. I hear that all the time, but I think we don't have a lot of common sense in some places. Responsibility with rights.
I don't know how more guns are going to help the situation. It seems like, to me, it's only, this just seems totally ridiculous. You know, I don't want, and I didn't, and I wouldn't have wanted any of my teachers, any of my children's teachers to have weapons. I don't know how well they're trained. They're trained in education. They're not trained in shooting a gun. And I talked to a former assistant principal, and he was like, "Oh, this is a nightmare," because he doesn't like guns at all. So to think that to flood more guns is going to help the issue, I think is just insane. It's like saying, okay, well, we have a lot of deaths by fentanyl. Let's just increase the amount of fentanyl that we have and, see what happens. I guess that's a bad illustration, but it does make about as much sense as that makes.
Yeah, it makes me think of my husband loves the old Western movies where they have the shootouts, and it makes me think in terms of us going back to those days where everybody's packing a gun, and at any moment you're gonna have a shootout in the middle of the OK Corral or something. I don't know. It is just incomprehensible for me why we need the amount of guns that we have in our society, and why are we the only country that suffers with this type of gun violence?
I went back. I'm not. Am I interrupting you? I'm sorry.
No, I'm finished.
Okay, I went back to look up when the shootings first started in the schools, and it went all the way back, like I think to the 1700s. But there was one killed at a time, or one wounded or two wounded, or, you didn't have the mass shooting that you have now. I think the one that probably some of us remember was in 1966 at the University of Texas, when the student got on the tower and had free reign of the campus. I think there were 18 killed in that episode. And since then, that was the largest shooting until the university, or I think it was Virginia Tech in 2007. Mm-hmm. So the fact that it's not only that we've got more guns, but we've got more capacity magazines that can handle more ammunition. And so they can shoot faster, further, and do more carnage than they could in the past. So it just doesn't make sense to me to do something like this. And I still go back. It was Representative Massey, was it, that had his Christmas picture taken with all the weapons, his whole family sitting in a very casual scene in their living room, I guess, or den, and each one of them holding a major weapon. That's Merry Christmas. I was going to say, I think it was really criticized on that issue too.
I think the other thing that all of us are aware of, and there's certainly a lot of mental health problems, and that's a real problem in our schools. I've talked to many teachers lately that after the pandemic and all of that, mental health has become a real issue among kids, as well as in our society, because of that isolation. And then on the other hand, the polarization among us, where people get angry and have grievances, sometimes legitimate, sometimes not so legitimate. But and so in the midst of that turmoil, to have weapons that can kill other people is really dangerous. And I think responsible limitation and, assault weapons, I don't understand why anybody wants an assault weapon other than the police department or an army. It's just crazy how we just got the whole thing out of perspective.
Well, we'll tie that to our second topic on our program, Moral Side of the News, and thank you for joining us. Weren't we all stunned by this week's series of mass shootings? 11 killed and 9 injured in Monterey Park, California. 2 days later, 7 people killed at 2 locations in Half Moon Bay, California. And 2 students were shot dead Monday at a Des Moines, Iowa educational nonprofit. So, panel, tying to what we just talked about, where do we begin with this story?
It's the way we've been going over and over and over again, and we've had more mass murders in the 2023 than we have days. We're 26 days in, and we've had 30 some odd different kinds of mass murders. I mean, that's insane. And of course, we've had homicides in Louisville. Even our Senator Mitch McConnell mentioned that yesterday, I think, on the Senate floor. How do we deal with all of this, and how do we help police departments? How do we find common ground? I just wish we could get, some responsible gun owners and legislators and parents in the same room and say, okay, let's respect each other. Let's try to listen to each other. what are common sense, common ground solutions that could make sure everybody is protected, rather than absolutism.
I understand in the heat of anger and people, killing each other or whatever. But the mass shootings, I don't understand why do you feel that you have to take so many lives with you in the mass shootings? I for the life of me, I don't understand, and I try to process the stories that I hear about the mass shooters, and that they were angry with a spouse, or someone ticked them off or something. But so if that's the case, then deal with that individual. But why is it that you feel the need to take everybody into that drama? And I don't know. And I know mental health has a lot to do with it, but I don't think that we are dealing with the real issues that we need to deal with in order to address this crisis that we have.
Sometimes it's workplace situations. Sometimes it's hate crimes. That was the Monterey Park, I guess, was one of them. First, they thought, is it against Asian Americans?
Right.
Or is it more workplace? It's all of those things. Excuse me, Sally.
Yeah.
Oh, no, that's okay. Sometimes, because I grew up in the country, I grew up on a farm, and I wonder if we don't have too much disconnect between nature and being together. I know we've not been able to be together, but we've been cooped up. We've not been able, a lot of us, to get out in nature to understand. I was talking to a friend the other night, and they've actually built a little cabin. They have no electricity, no running water, and yet they look forward to going to this place as often as possible. It reminds me of Merton's Hermitage so long ago, when there's such a thing as forced solitude, but then there's also solitude in nature, and somehow it's a respect for all of life. And I think we've lost that somewhere along the way. Help me out with this, Joe. How have we lost that connection?
Well, I think it's common respect, civility. I think I don't like to beat up politicians, but certainly over the last 15, 20 years, our politics has gotten so polarized, and then we demonize whoever disagrees with us. And I've seen that roll over into churches. I'm sure all of you have seen that too, that, somebody thinks, well, I believe this about, whatever it is, and I disagree with you. I believe this, and well, you're demonic, and all our language, and the kids see all this bullying going on. I often say that I get parents in schools that I've been involved with. Well, Father, you got to do something about the bullying in schools, blah, 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 blah. And I said, where did the kids learn the bullying? Oftentimes it's on TV and at home. And I don't have them when they're watching TV, and I don't have them when they're at home. So it's not just my responsibility in the school, but it's a collaborative thing. What about our language at home? And our lack of religious values, I think, or overlooking religious values, or thinking my religious value is the only right way, is sick in our society.
So many victims often go nameless in these crimes because, as you mentioned, Father Joe, there have been so many already this year. But aren't the victims is far more reaching? It affects so many family and friends and people who knew these people who passed away, and it's kind of has these tentacles, and it just keeps multiplying as we go along.
Well, everybody's so surprised and stunned that it happened in their community, as if their community is immune to any of the things that we're talking about. I don't think any community, any setting is immune. And it's just really, there needs to be a need for self-awareness, to know your surroundings, to know where you are, to pay attention to who you're with, to make sure that you're not doing something that is antagonizing the situation instead of de-escalating the situation. I don't know if that helps any, but I don't think it would hurt.
But a lot of these killings that we're hearing about are unprovoked. I mean, as far as I can see, and what is causing us is to not be able to live life freely. I heard somebody say, well, they're going to stop going to public places. They're going to stop doing things because out of fear, they don't know, what to expect or where to go. And it's not like these things are random. So it's not like you can plan or yes, you always want to be aware of your surroundings, but who would have ever thought if you went to a dance studio to dance that someone was going to come in and start shooting? And so it's creating an amount of fear among people, where that's the fear that causes people to want to carry weapons so that they can protect themselves. And so all it's doing is exacerbating the situation.
Okay, panel, we'll move on to our third topic here on Moral Side of the News. Former Louisville Metro Police Officer Jonathan Mattingly is on the road promoting his new book about the Breonna Taylor shooting. Recently, he was a guest at a dinner hosted by the Republican women of South Central Kentucky and Bowling Green. While the group met on the restaurant's second floor, other customers said they could hear loud video footage from the night of that raid. Quote, "We were all disgusted and infuriated," end of quote, said customer Casey Johnson. So let's turn to our panel and get your reaction.
Well, it did seem like a strange place to have it. And again, it sounded, and without trying to be too judgmental, a political event that was composed of people who tend to be on what we might call the far right. Who, police officers are, for some on the far right, are God, and therefore we need to back and support our police officers. And I think we do need to do that. But this case has been a very controversial case. I'm not sure that we know all the facts about it because there's been so many conflicting stories. But it seemed like having that in a public place where other people are in a restaurant and can hear all this kind of thing was inappropriate. If you want to have a hall somewhere where it's just you all and he wants to talk about his book, that can be understood, but it was an inappropriate place and not respecting the rights of other people to have a dinner and not be disturbed by the dinner by something going on in another room. That just seems terribly bad. And again, it goes back to the polarization that, we want to do what we want to do. And my freedom means I can do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. Well, the scriptures never say that. And our Constitution never says that. It's like rights and responsibility. And you don't have a right to be irresponsible.
There's still a lot of polarization around the Breonna Taylor situation, a lot of polarization. And I can see where people would be easily offended. I would be offended if I were trying to have a meal and I had to listen to that kind of newscast or whatever it was that was going on. I'm sure with gunshots fired and everything else, it would be distracting, to say the least. And then also not taking into account the feelings that somebody else would have around that same issue. Yeah, I agree with you, Joe. I think that was very, very inappropriate.
I don't have any comments on this.
You don't have any comments on this?
No.
Oh.
But I do think in a lot of these, whether it's George Floyd and all that, I mean, that all came in the middle of the pandemic. And George Floyd was controversial, and part of it, it opened the wounds of our Black community and some in our white community of total dysfunction and misunderstanding. And it's so sad. I mean, we've got another case, obviously, the Memphis case that we're hearing on television right now with the young man and the I guess five police officers. Mm-hmm. And evidently there's some charges that are supposed to come out this afternoon, which is, we're taping this on a Thursday afternoon. Again, it's all part of the thing is we don't try to sit down and talk with other people and listen to other people. And I think our churches have sometimes failed in this, that we should be more preaching about these kind of things. Now, unfortunately, as many pastors would tell you, as soon as I open my mouth about that, all heck is going to break loose in my congregation about people, but you shouldn't say that, and you shouldn't say that, and I'm leaving this church, and I'm going to another church, and all that kind of stuff, rather than saying, well, can't we talk about what gospel or scriptural principles are? How do we deal with each other civilly? How do we find a common understanding? How do we find common good, which is a scriptural principle, both Jewish and Christian? And we seem to have lost that. We kind of, it's all about Jesus loves me, and I've been saved by Jesus, and I think Jesus does love us, and Jesus has saved us, but that's not where Jesus stopped. And loving your neighbor and getting along with your neighbor is basic, and some people don't want to hear that, unfortunately.
Right.
Well, I think you also, as clergy, have to weigh very seriously how you deal with justice issues and how you see justice issues. As a female, of course, there's always sexism that we have dealt with in the church since its beginning, almost. Maybe it was a little better in the time of Jesus than it's been ever since. But
not so sure about that.
Yeah,
I was gonna say I don't think so, but
well, perhaps. I mean, at least there was more of equality among Jesus. I didn't get the feeling that that Jesus' teaching didn't include equality. I very much felt that it did. So justice issues and dealing with matters of equality are very important to me. And how do we do this in a way that our members of the congregation can hear what we're trying to say instead of being openly offended?
Yeah.
I will tell a quick story about, as a matter of fact, I just saw this gentleman in the last week at a funeral home, but it was like, and I knew he was fairly conservative. And I did a homily on at that particular church on immigration, because the scriptures were talking about that. And I kind of try to walk through the scriptures, Old and New Testament. And at the end of it, I said, now, you may disagree with me, but it seems to me that it's not me you disagree with, but you need to take that up with Jesus. And after the Mass, that he was waiting for me in the back church.
Of course he was.
But I thought it was really interesting what he said. He said, when you started on the topic, I was getting really uptight about, He better not go here. He better not go there. He better not. And he said, then I was listening to what you said. Everything you said was scriptural. And then when you said at the end, you may not like what I've said, but you got to take it up with Jesus. And he said, that hit me right in the face. I said, that's exactly where I need to take it up. And he said, I need to listen to Jesus. And he said, you've made me think about this. Well, that's kind of what I said. I've accomplished what I should have accomplished.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Sally. Go ahead.
I was going to say one quick story. I had an older gentleman when I preached one Sunday at visiting clergy, walked up to me and said, I'll never accept women ministers. And I said, that's fine. I just hope she doesn't do your funeral one day.
The only thing I think about all of this, it's fine for us to have these conversations with people who are Christians or who have a belief system, but how do we have this type of civil conversation with those who don't believe? And we find that there are more and more of those people who do not believe and don't want to hear about love and treating your neighbor as we treat as Jesus treats us. They don't want to hear that because they don't have that belief system, and they don't care, and they are willing to argue with you that your belief system is not correct, and they have a right to say what they want to say and do what they want to do and feel how they want to feel. And so how do you deal with that set of people?
That's the challenge of our time.
That's the challenge. And there are more and more people like that these days.
I do think if we get people to talking with each other and saying, let's listen. I want to listen to you. I ask you to listen to me. If we can just get people to do something basic like that, even people I've strongly disagreed with, we found there's more common ground than we realized we have. We got to get there.
Yes, I agree with that.
A good way to end our program, Moral Side of the News. Thank you to Father Joe Graffis, Reverend Sally McClain, and Dr. Jamesetta Ferguson. And you can catch this program again anytime on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. And also, if you listen to podcasts, you can include Moral Side in your rotation. Just search for it wherever you get your podcast. Until next time, panel, thanks for your time. And the conversations continue next week on Moral Side of the News. So long for now. In just a few months, we'll celebrate the 70th annual WHAS Crusade for Children on June 3rd and 4th. But you don't have to wait till then to get involved. Just go to WHAScrusade.org and see the many ways you can donate to help change a child's life. You can always mail your donation to 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky 40202. That's 520 West Chestnut Street, Louisville, Kentucky 40202.